I'm Aya Bay, and this video I'm going to be talking about my first time giving birth. So this is a story about my first labor experience, my first ever labor experience, and I'm really excited to share it with y'all and just hear, what your thoughts are, what questions you might have for me about this birth or about birth in general, and things like that. So let's get into it. First off, I like to start by mentioning the key points that make my birth story unique. One is that it was an all natural birth. So I didn't take any pain medications, any medication for pain relief at all whatsoever. So that's that. I felt everything. But it was also relatively pain-free. And I would say at least I didn't experience pain in the way that I had previously perceived that labor, just inevitably would feel like from, mainstream media influences and movies and all that stuff that you see about birth that kind of paints the picture of what it's going to be like and what it's going to feel like. It wasn't anything like that for me, but I felt everything. Two is that it was a home birth. So I gave birth at home. I didn't go to a hospital, and because I was giving birth at home, I was able to tailor my environment to exactly the vision that I had for my first birth. So I literally was able to create the environment for my dream birth, and I wouldn't have been able to do that in the same way if I was to go to a hospital if I was to be in a hospital setting for the labor, because a lot of the environment is fixed when you go to a hospital, like the lighting and who's going to be in the room and just things like that. So that's that. Number three is that I didn't have a doctor or a midwife present during my birth, and this was my first time giving birth. I didn't have a doctor or a midwife present. We had just a birth assistant, so it was just myself, our birth assistant, so-called doula, and my consort, my partner, my king, was there. And so it was just the three of us. It was very private, very intimate, very peaceful, and it was just beautiful because of that, and I was really able to go within for that, like the guide, like my inner guide, I guess you can say, that really helped push me through and empowered me throughout the labor, as opposed to needing some outside authoritative figure like a doctor, or even in some cases, some women do feel like they need a midwife for that reason, a licensed midwife. But I didn't need any of that. And then for the last key point was that we did a lotus birth. So after the labor, we did not cut off the placenta, and or we did not cut off the cord. We didn't cut the umbilical cord, which is attached to the placenta. So I gave birth to my son, and then after that I gave birth to the placenta, and we let it detach naturally. And if you're not familiar with lotus births, you're welcome to look it up, research it, see what all that entails. But I'll talk a little bit more about that if you guys are interested in hearing about how our lotus birth experience went with the first baby. Let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do a separate video on that. But we did a lotus birth, so we did not cut the cord during the labor or after the birth. So those are the four main points that make my birth story unique. And if you're interested, continue watching, because I'm going to talk about some of the major like just points that I felt like was really empowering and inspiring with my birth story and my birth experience. So I'm excited to share with y'all. Alright, so first off, I'd like to talk about just like my background with birth and with labor. And yes, for those of you who don't know, I am pregnant right now. I'm pregnant and 9 months, and I'm due in less than 2 weeks. So there's that. I'm going to probably be talking about about my second birth story soon after, but this is a lot of the reason why I was inspired to start sharing my experience with birth and just talking about natural birth and home birth, because I'm really passionate about educating my sea stars, on the possibilities of what we can do and what our bodies are capable of with birthing, and really, starting to break down the programming that a lot of us received about birthing and what it's supposed to be like, and what it's supposed to feel like, what it's gonna feel like, how the experience is gonna be, and all of that we received just through subconscious messages and movies, and even the news and just all media in general, over the years and years, and even from our mothers and grandmothers, and even in some cases great grandmothers and great grandmothers, or great, you get the point, that a lot of them weren't even educated about natural birthing and home birthing and anything outside of hospital birthing experiences and how those traditionally go or typically go. So I'm really excited and looking forward to start sharing with y'all about some of the things I've learned as I've been researching natural birthing and home birthing, and just share from my experiences with y'all what I've been able to experience so far with one birth down, another to go, and yeah. So as far as my specific background, nobody that I know of in my direct lineage has had a home birth. So I had my first birth with my son. During the pregnancy, I didn't have any doctor visits. Me and my partner, we intentionally chose not to go, to the doctor and have an ultrasound at all. So I know that's the norm for a lot of women, is to have several visits, several ultrasounds throughout the pregnancy for different reasons, to test for different things, and to check for different things. But we really relied heavily on spirit, basically, to guide us throughout the pregnancy, and just had faith in my body, had faith in the fact that basically this process that I was enduring for the first time, that that I had everything I need to be able to handle it, that the baby was going to be healthy, and things of that sort. And we just stuck to that faith throughout the entire experience, and it was a test of our faith, really. So through that, not getting ultrasounds done and all these tests and things like that done that are just to make sure, but are not actually necessary through us not doing any of those, we were really testing our faith, and then also proving to ourselves that that stuff is not actually necessary. My son is healthy and happy, a growing son now. And so having had that first experience of kind of being in the darkness, the shadow, or trying something that is practically unheard of, or that most people are not talking about, or that is not publicly promoted, seemed a little risky, but basically through us just staying the course and doing our due diligence, doing our research, making sure that we were well informed on different things, and that we had the support that we needed throughout the process, that we've experienced that it's perfectly safe to do that. And that really you don't need to do that stuff, unless you have specific circumstances, where health concerns concerns or things like that that you would need to be checking for, then that's another story. But in most normal cases, you don't even need to go to the doctor. That's one thing. Not saying there's anything wrong with it for the queens who, may still feel like they should or need to, but even when it came down to the gender, determining the gender or predicting the gender of our son, we went without an ultrasound. We did something called Chinese gender predictor calculator, or they also call it the Chinese gender predictor calendar. And we use that to determine the gender, or to predict the gender of our son. And several months prior to me giving birth, we did that, and it said that he was going to be a boy. And I'll talk more about that either later or in another video. I probably will do a whole nother video about it, because it's very fascinating to me how, that's an ancient system that has been used to predict like the gender of babies, that a lot of the Chinese use it, which is why it's called the Chinese gender predictor calculator or calendar. But it's based on numbers. It's based on numerology. And so you plug in certain numbers into the system, and it'll tell you, or it'll predict if you're going to have a boy or girl. And it's based on the month, of conception, or particular date of conception, and then the month that the baby's born. And it'll let you know, like, if your baby is going to be born around this time, you're going to have a boy. If your baby's going to be born around this time, you're going to have a girl. And it's also based on the mother's date of birth. So it gets really heavy or deep, I would say, into the numbers. And so that's why it's so accurate. And it's like super fascinating and super interesting to me, because I've talked to a few sea stars, even recently, who even are like familiar with natural birth, and have had their own natural births, have had a home birth, things like that, and still didn't even know about the Chinese gender predictor calculator or calendar, and didn't know about how effective it is or can be, and the fact that they didn't even need to get an ultrasound to determine or predict their baby's gender. So that's definitely something that I look forward to sharing with y'all. And if you got any questions for me about that specifically, also let me know in the comments, please. So for my first labor, what I was aiming for was a pain-free birth. So I set my intentions. I had a vision for like my dream birth, and what I started to envision was I wanted to be pain-free. I believe that our bodies were made for this, and that birth doesn't have to be painful. And the reason why I set that intention and I started to have that vision for my labor was because I started to come across a lot of information, a lot of just information through doing my research, that labor doesn't have to be painful. And on the other hand, on the contrast, labor can actually be like comfortable and pleasant. I'm recording, baby. Can you take him? So I basically started to realize through a lot of these stories, a lot of women's stories, and a lot of people that just educate about natural birth and home birth experiences, that labor doesn't have to be painful. And I was like, that was a kind of like a moment of like what's the word? Like my mind was blown. My mind was blown initially, like, what? Because I definitely was under the impression that it did. And so when I came across that information, I'm like, okay. So I thoroughly, continued researching that, and I started to come across different things. But once I completed my research, throughout that pregnancy about that particular aspect, about birth being able to be pain free and things like that, I definitely, that was definitely one of my major intentions for the birth. And so that was one. The second thing was that I wanted my labor experience to be empowering. I felt like this was my first time going into birth. This was my first time giving birth to a child here on this earth. Like, I'm a woman. I came here, in the flesh as a woman. And so that is a huge part of my experience here as a woman, is our ability to, give birth to children, and, that entire experience. And so I felt like it was kind of an initiation phase for me, which it literally is. We go from when we start to carry a child, our body starts to change, and we go through all these changes. But the moment that we give birth, we literally transform from a woman to a mother, and that is in itself a sacred initiation. So I really wanted the experience to be empowering for me, in the sense where I felt connected to my ancestors, to where I felt connected to all the women who have done it before me, all the women who have done it in the way that I know it can be done, but that is not commonly promoted today. So, raw, natural, without pain medication, without this like traumatic experience, and without pain, without all these things that are typically seen and promoted around birth and labor. I wanted to basically be connected with those women, and really with that energy, that frequency, because it's all within anyway. I wanted to be connected with that through this experience, and I wanted my empowerment to come through me overcoming whatever challenges or obstacles that might have come up throughout the labor, because I while I was expecting it to be pain-free, or I was looking forward to it being pain-free, I wasn't expecting it to be challenge-free or obstacle-free, because I feel like that's the point of the initiation, in a sense. Like when I think about like tribal initiations of different indigenous communities around the world, I think about things like, walking across like hot lava rocks, or different things like that, where it can seem crazy, like it's so like, it seems like it's so risky, and if it wasn't for the purposes of an initiation, or if it wasn't for the purposes of overcoming this challenge of the flesh, of the physical, in order to elevate and to transform the spiritual body and the emotional body and the mental body of the individual, of the being, that it would definitely cause some harm. But because it's a spiritual experience, a spiritual transformation that's taking place on a deeper level, that they're able to literally do that and not be subject to the same laws of physics. That's super interesting to me, and I felt like my labor would be, or I felt like birth in general is something similar to those types of initiations that women go through. And the last thing that I was aiming for, so the three things that I was aiming for with this labor was, for one, for it to be pain-free, two, for it to be empowering, and the last three, for it to be peaceful. And as far as what it was actually like, so I told you guys, I shared with y'all what I was aiming for it to be like, and now I'm gonna share with y'all what it was actually like. So as far as the pain-free part, it was almost pain-free. And I say almost because my contractions weren't painful. They totally pain free. The entire labor where I was just going through the contractions, moving through the contractions like waves, that didn't hurt. The only part that did somewhat hurt for me, but it didn't really even hurt that much, was when it was time for me to push, because I did tear. I tore with my first child, and that's not something that I was even really that informed about, because I didn't realize when I was pushing that I didn't realize whether or not that was normal or not. Like, I didn't know, if tearing was like just a normal part of giving birth, and that's another, like, I feel like side effect of or product of the lack of information that most women, including myself, up until that pregnancy had about birthing and labor. And then just due to the fact that we rely so heavily on doctors and just the hospitals to tell us and do everything for us regarding the labor, and just point us in the right direction, as opposed to really being informed about our bodies and being informed about the experience and what to expect, and just moving forward on that knowledge and with that with that inner guidance. So yeah, I didn't know whether or not that was normal, but it didn't hurt as much, because at that point I started pushing at the very, very end. So I literally was probably only pushing for about maybe 5 minutes, if that. And the birth assistant that was helping us, she took a mirror and she showed me my baby's head crowning, like coming out. And when I saw the tip of his head and his little hair on his head, I was like, oh my gosh, like, it literally sent me, the only words I said, literally, like, I uttered words. I was like, my baby. I was so emotional in that space. And for those of y'all who know, you know that, like, when a woman is in labor, you're literally in a deep trance state. Like, it's not the same. Your state of consciousness is not the same as your everyday self. You're not talking like normal. You're not thinking like normal. You're literally like in a trance-like state. So I managed to utter out some words, and it just came out so emotional. But it was just like, my baby, like, and I just felt so connected. I was like, wow, like, okay, first I've been carrying him for all these months. Now he's literally about to come out. Like, his head is there, he's ready. And to me, when she showed me that in the mirror, because otherwise, like, I couldn't see, like, just looking down, like, my belly's in the way, I couldn't see. But when she showed me that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay. And then she's like, she like, encouraged me to start pushing. And I actually didn't want to push for my first labor. Like, for some reason, that was also one of my intentions, or one of my kind of expectations, was that I wouldn't need to push, that my body would just naturally do the work, and that my body would naturally, like, push the baby out, and it'll be gentle, and I wouldn't actually have to forcefully push him out, which I wouldn't say that that's not possible, because I've heard people talk about it being possible, and women haven't experienced that before. So with that said, I'm still open to that being a possibility for some of my future births, but with that particular birth, it wasn't the case. At least at that time, I started pushing to get his head out, because his head was there, but he wasn't just like gliding out. So so yeah, as I was pushing though, every time I pushed, I could feel myself literally start tearing, and it was like it was like I'm pushing and I could feel it tearing, and it was like, what it felt like was a sting, or like a burning sensation. But I had so much adrenaline going, because I just saw my baby, like, I saw his head, he's right there, he's about to come out. It's like I had so much adrenaline going that it was just like, it didn't really faze me as much. Like, I just pushed through it. I literally buckled down. Mind you, I was in a squatting position, so I wasn't laying on my back. I delivered my son basically in a squatting position, like standing up, relatively low to the ground. I think I had, like, my arms rested behind me on the bed, and, like, I was just squatting and, like, pushing him out. And then my consort, he was behind me. So I think at this point, I know at one point he was literally physically holding me up while I was squatting. And he was doing that for a while I was like trying to push and stuff like that. But this time, I don't remember if he was like right behind me, but he was somewhere close behind me, and I was like doing like this and squatting and pushing him out. And so like I'm literally standing up, squatting. I can feel him coming down, but it's like I can feel his head coming out, and it's like that was the motivation for me. So it was like, because I knew he was coming out and he was right there, he was ready, you know, it was just like the burning sensation didn't faze me as much. I just, that moment is really when I started to tap into that inner strength that I wanted to tap into, which ties into the next intention that I set for the birth, which was for it to be empowering. It's funny because you know how they say like, you know, be careful what you ask for, because you know the Most High is the creator, the source, whoever, whatever it is that you believe in, will give it to you exactly. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it won't be in the way that you expected or that you anticipated. So be careful what you ask for. I feel like that definitely happened with this labor, because I asked for it to be empowering. I also asked for it to be pain-free, but I asked for it to be empowering. And for me, the most empowering part, or the most transformative part where I experienced that empowerment, was when I was having to push, when I was literally feeling that burning sensation of myself tearing. Like I could literally feel it. It's like I was thinking about my baby. For one, I was seeing him. I'm like, okay, he's here. My job is to get him out, make sure he's safe, make sure he's healthy, make sure there's no complications or anything like that. So, you know, just pushing him out. And so, you know, that was my focus. But then also, a way that I kind of coped with the burning sensation, and you know, just like the challenge of pushing through that, was really honing in on the strength of all the women that have done it before me, you know, because I know I'm not the first woman that has torn. I know I'm not the first woman that has experienced something like that, or worse, you know, in the process of giving birth. And somehow, some way, they did it. And if they could do it, I could do it. So that was a part of, you know, my focus at the time, where I'm like, okay, I'm connected to these women basically through these experiences, you know, my ancient indigenous ancestors, the ancient women of the, you know, advanced civilizations of history or of the past, basically all exist within me. And that was my way of really aligning with their frequencies and aligning with their power, and really allowing that power to shine outwardly through myself, you know, as the medium. So that was so empowering. But that's the only part where it wasn't entirely pain-free. So I feel like it's kind of ironic that it happened that way, but I wouldn't have asked for it to be any other way, because I got that empowering aspect that I asked for, and it was still such a beautiful experience after the fact. And it was so worth it, because I wasn't pushing for that long. Like I said, it was like 5 minutes or less, and my baby was literally like in my hands. And it was like the moment, like the feeling I had when holding him, it just made it all worth it. It was just like, wow, you know. So there's that. And then as far as it being peaceful, it definitely was, because like I said, it was just the three of us there, myself, my consort, and our birth assistant, who we, you know, it was someone that we trusted, you know, someone that we knew through a private community, who offered those services. Now, while she wasn't a licensed midwife, she was a birth assistant, or a so-called doula, or she is. And she was very knowledgeable, and she helped us out so much, because even though we felt like we were doing our due diligence, we were doing all this research about natural birth and pregnancy and stuff like that to try to inform ourselves, because I didn't have a doctor throughout the entire pregnancy. There was still so much that we didn't know, that we didn't know. And so by having her there for my first time giving birth, it was so helpful, because there were so many times where, well, just throughout the whole thing, she was super supportive. And I feel like a huge part of that was because I actually took the time, you know, and energy to write out my birth plan prior to the labor. So since I wrote out my birth plan, I included in it exactly how I wanted the environment to be, exactly what I wanted to, you know, like what types of things I wanted to be said, during the labor, what types of things I, didn't want to hear during the labor, and what types of things I wanted to experience, whether I wanted to be touched, whether I wanted massage, whether I wanted to be offered anything to drink or to eat or anything like that. Like, I got super specific, and basically I got exactly what I asked for in my birth plan. So I provided that to our birth assistant. She was clear on my expectations, and she literally just came, she showed up, and she was so helpful. Like, she literally was so supportive, and just constantly feeding me with positive affirmations and inspiring me to keep going, and just encouraging me and reminding me of how strong I was and how good I was doing and things like that. So that was super helpful. But not only that, she is a mama herself, and her children, or her child, is grown now. So she has this experience with motherhood, and then also through her birth assistant experience, having helped so many mamas basically give birth naturally and at home and things like that. She has experience with how labor should go, and how what things you should be looking out for and doing after the labor also. So there were a lot of things within that she was just like kind of pressing or reminding me to do or to check for, that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And so I was so grateful to have her there. And so that's one thing that I would recommend if you are a queen thinking about doing a natural birth or having a home birth for your first labor. Don't rule out, even though I'm saying like no doctor, no midwife, don't rule out someone that's educated and that has experienced that firsthand, being present at your labor for support, because you can definitely move through it yourself. You don't need somebody constantly making suggestions and telling you what to do, but somebody that's knowledgeable in giving birth and has experienced that before. I definitely recommend having at least one queen, one woman, one elder or something that is there that will help you, but also making sure that their energy is conducive to the environment that you would like for your birth. So making sure that it's somebody who is on the same page as you as far as your expectations with what how your body is going to be able to handle the labor, and not somebody that's just going to bring doubt and negativity into your birth environment, but somebody who is just as confident in your body's ability to have a natural birth and a natural labor and to deliver a healthy baby as you are. So that's what I would recommend. But I definitely recommend for your first time having somebody there for support. Not necessarily for guidance or to catch the baby or for just telling you what to do throughout the labor or any of that, but just straight up for support. And then after that, I feel like like once you've experienced it one time and really firsthand what to expect from your body, and from just through delivering a baby for the first time, you might feel like you don't need to even have a doula or birth assistant present or whatever at that point, and that's up to you. But I would definitely recommend for your first time having someone there. But also just, I'm living proof that you don't need a doctor or a midwife. It doesn't have to be a doctor or a midwife for your first time, even if but I would also say do your research. If you are going to do that, do your research so that you're well informed, because otherwise you asking for a disaster to happen, basically. Because a lot of what gets in our way, I feel like, during those experiences for women is like a mental shutdown almost, out of fear of what could happen, out of worrying about how it's going, out of not knowing what to expect, and just literally defaulting to like worry mode and fear mode and just like panic, fight or flight type energy. So yeah, with that said, do your research, and just trust your body, trust your own your own judgment, for your body and yourself. Some of you may feel like you don't even need that, and that's up to you. That's ultimately your decision to make. I can just give my recommendation and share my experience, and that's all. And just for the record, this is not intended to be medical advice. This is, you know, the purpose of this video is solely for informational and educational purposes, also slightly entertainment purposes. So, you know, don't be, you know, trying to say that I told you to go do this and do that. You know, do your own research, do your own due diligence. I'm just recommending what I recommend based on my experience, and sharing my experience with y'all and letting y'all know, you know, another example of what's possible. So, if y'all are interested, I want to keep this video pretty short and it's getting pretty long. So if you're interested in hearing about my birth plan, specifically, as a matter of fact, no, I'm gonna share my birth plan with y'all, and then in this video, and then I'll get into what I'm gonna talk about in the next video. So for my birth plan specifically for this labor, my birth plan consisted or emphasized that I desired like quiet, soft voices in my birth environment. So that was one of the things that I wanted. I also wanted like constant uplifting affirmations, you know, and like I said, like I mentioned, the birth assistant that we had present with us, she definitely was like constantly doing that. And another thing that I mentioned on my birth plan was to be offered lots to drink to stay hydrated. And those are just some of the main things. Other things were like really simple. I didn't really have that many demands or that many requests. I just knew the environment that I wanted, and I got exactly what I asked for. Like I got literally exactly what I asked for. And it didn't just come from me asking for it and hoping for the best and, you know, kind of still going with the status quo of, you know, what society recommends for labor and for, you know, giving birth and stuff like that, as far as or going to a hospital, having a doctor, or even having a midwife, or any of those things. I didn't just go with the flow with those things and just be hoping for the best. I literally had to challenge myself to overcome some of my deepest fears, deepest embedded, ingrained fears around birthing and around labor, in order to feel confident enough in my body, in order to feel comfortable enough in whatever home environment or setting that I created, to be able to do that. And I did it, and I'm so proud that I was able to do that. But that's also why I'm here sharing this video right now, because I want to remind y'all that it's possible for you to do the same thing, you know. And it won't necessarily come easy, because you literally have to start to face a lot of those fears that you have around birthing. Start to identify them. You know, what are the points that you're super concerned about? And what I would recommend, one of the main things I would recommend for overcoming those fears, is doing your research, because knowledge is the only thing that can basically what do you call it? Knowledge is the only thing that can basically eliminate fear. So once you inform yourself about what the facts actually are, once you inform yourself about what's actually possible, once you inform yourself about how you can go about doing what it is that you want to do, then that can eliminate the fear. So just to share with y'all some of the actually, this was, so like I said, I was going to share my birth plan with y'all, and then I'm going to save this for another video. So in the next video, I'm going to share with y'all how I actually prepared myself mentally and spiritually to have the birth of my dreams, because I had the birth of my dreams and it was very intentional, you know. So the whole preparation period of me doing that was heavily just researching, but a lot of it was me doing inner reflections. And I got some books and watched a documentary or two, you know, related to the topic, that really helped me a lot, really helped me to clarify some things, and really helped me to go inward and do the reflection that I needed in order to have the confidence that I needed to have that birth that I did. So I'll share that with y'all in another video if you're interested. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about specifically, or if there's anything that I mentioned or that I slightly started to cover in this video that you want to hear me talk more about. Let me know what y'all think. What are y'all thoughts? What are your concerns? Are you pregnant right now? Are you looking forward to getting pregnant in the near future? Would you like to have a natural birth? Would you like to have a home birth? What are your main concern points about those particular fields, those particular things? And is there anything that you feel like is getting in the way of you doing that? What is it? I love to hear from y'all. Let me know in the comments. And until next time, peace.